Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I'm an independent knitwear designer who likes to make knittertaining videos here on Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure you check in the description below where you will see links to all the different things I do on social media. I have been thinking about some of the things that, as a pattern writer and as a knitter who's been knitting for a while, that I sometimes take for granted that might not be immediately obvious for a more beginning knitter. There are things that are just assumed that you knew. I made one video on how to tell the right from the wrong side and understanding what those are, right versus wrong side. I'll link to that. And I made a video on carrying the yarn up the side. There are things that you find in patterns that are just said, but not necessarily explained within the pattern because it's just assumed that you understand what it means through the experience or your reading or in your essentially beginning knitting classes that you might have taken. And I realized that for a lot of people, the internet and YouTube's particularly is it's how they're teaching themselves how to knit. And there's certain things they might run across that they might get the gist of, but they don't completely understand. And one of those things that I decided I wanted to talk about today was the instruction of Knitwise versus Purlwise. And you'll find this in a pattern, and it will say something like slip a stitch purlwise or insert your needle purlwise. It's found in slipping stitches, in creating other like multi-step stitches, and also when you're doing grafting, like if you're doing a Kitchener stitch, they will tell you to insert your needle or your yarn needle or slip something either knitwise or purlwise. And in working with newer knitters that come into the store I work at, I've realized that people don't necessarily understand exactly what knitwise and purlwise mean. And the number one thing that they really haven't, that's easy to not quite get right, is thinking that either knitwise or purlwise has anything to do with where your yarn is. I've run into people who, when it says purlwise, they assume that the yarn has to be in front of the work because they know to purl you have to move your yarn to the front of your work or in front of your needles. But the thing is, knitwise and purlwise have nothing to do with where your yarn is. Knitwise and purlwise are instructions telling you how to insert your needle into the stitch. And I have made little demos here that I can show you. So what it is it's teaching you how to manipulate a stitch for some reason, like what we've mentioned, slipping, making a different stitch, and it's telling you how to put your needle in. So if an instruction says insert needle knitwise, what they mean is for you to take your right hand needle and insert it from the front, from left to right, through that front loop on your stitch, and you've inserted your needle knitwise, as if you were making a knit. Now, if you have difficulties, remember, or if you're just getting started and you need a mnemonic, one of the ways that I think of is when you insert that needle, so it's going like this and it makes a little cross, it's like the legs in a K. If you visualize an imaginary vertical line, you've got your other your needles are making that little K. So you've inserted knitwise. And then you proceed to do whatever the pattern tells you to do with that stitch. Purlwise, you're going to insert your needle from right to left through that front leg, that loop. And what happens in the way I remember that is for purlwise, you're inserting your needle parallel to your right hand needle, goes parallel to your left hand needle. Parallel starts with P, that's purl. So when you insert knitwise, your needles make a little K. And when you insert purlwise, you're going parallel from right to left. And then you just proceed to do whatever it is your pattern has told you to do, either knitwise or purlwise. Why does it matter, knitwise versus purlwise? To understand that, what you need to do is look at what is happening to the stitch that you are manipulating. When you slip something or move something purlwise, and you'll see in my little thing that you've moved it from the left-hand needle to the right-hand needle, but you're maintaining that stitch's orientation on your needle. It is still mounted with a traditional Western mount. Your leg number 1 is in the front of the needle and leg number 2 is wrapped around back. It's mounted, so it's just, you've literally just transferred it from one stitch, one needle to the other without changing it at all. That's purlwise. When you slip a stitch or move the stitch knitwise, you're actually reorienting that stitch. And you can see here in my little box, you can see how when you reorient that stitch, if you were then to knit into it or purl into it from behind, it's twisted. You've twisted that stitch. Now, this is sometimes a desirable thing, sometimes not something you want, but you need to understand that knitwise versus purlwise, there's usually a reason why the designer, the person who's written the pattern, wants that stitch to be oriented in a specific way. Now, you can slip it or move it knitwise or purlwise. You can do it with the yarn in the back. You can do it with the yarn in the front. And that is something you need to check with your pattern. But the actual term knitwise or purlwise has nothing to do with where your yarn is positioned. You need to reference your pattern to see where your yarn is supposed to be while you're executing one of these maneuvers. So, why does it matter? Let's take a slip-slip knit. A slip-slip knit creates a left-leaning decrease. So you slip knitwise, and then you slip the next stitch knitwise. And as we've discussed, that reorients those stitches, as you can see. And then you can place them back on the line. I'm doing this so you can really see, and then you knit those together through the back loop. And you can see that yields that flat stitch. Now, if you didn't reorient these stitches before knitting together through the back loop, you still get a left-leaning decrease, but it's twisted. So here, you can see that here. And right there, you see how that little front leg is twisted? And so again, that might be fine, but if you don't want that twist, that's why you slip knitwise. The same thing is a part of a slip one, knit two together, pass slip stitch over. You slip it knitwise, knit the two together so that when you pass that stitch over, since you reoriented it, it's going to give you a flat open decrease. If you slip that stitch initially, just slip it purlwise, you haven't reoriented it, it's going to stay open, then you knit two together, and when you pass it over, it's going to twist. So that is why when you're working stitches that are constituent parts of like other stitches, you frequently have to slip them knitwise. It's one of the most common times. But when you're slipping stitches like for slip stitch color work or just a slip stitch style texture work, you're slipping purlwise because you don't want that twisted stitch. You want it to be nice and smooth. So I hope that that has cleared a little bit up. If you had any questions about knitwise versus purlwise, that you understand better. It doesn't have anything to do with the way the yarn is, and it has everything to do about telling you how to insert your needle. You're inserting it knitwise, as if you're going to knit, or purlwise, as if you're going to purl. So if you've come across something in a pattern that it seems like the author of the pattern is sort of taking it for granted that you might need explained, please let me know in the description below, and I can see if I can make a video to cover it so that it might help out other relatively beginning knitters. And hopefully this explanation has given you some insight into the structure of how certain stitches work and why you may be instructed to do something. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, click that like button. And if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.